This podcast is owned and operated by the RCR Association, a private third party to the Department of National Defense. The content of this podcast is the responsibility of the RCR Association and does not necessarily reflect the views or policies of the Government of Canada. The official emblems of the regiment are used with the permission of Regimental Headquarters, the RCR. Everybody, hello, this is Manny Singh. I'm a sergeant from 3RCR. If you don't know already, the host of the RCR Association podcast. Today's guest is somebody who I'm so fortunate to have today, a special guest actually. They're the author of this book, White School, Black Memories. It's written by Chief Warrant Officer John Barnes. Sir, thank you so much for joining us today.
My honor.
Just to introduce Chief Warrant Officer John Barnes, I do want to give everybody some brief details. He served in the Canadian Armed Forces as an infantry soldier for 36 years, primarily in the Royal Canadian Regiment in Germany, Cyprus, the former Yugoslavia, Qatar, and Afghanistan. While serving there with 1RCR in 2006, he was the company sergeant major of Charles Company. And that's a very famous rotational deployment of 306. That's something that in my career, I came up understanding very much about the significance of different rotations, and especially 306, Operation Medusa. Something that earned a citational award to the regiment that I got to wear as someone who never participated in that significant battle engagement. That was such a big deal to the regiment, 1st Battalion. And I'm talking so much, sir. Thank you for joining us today.
That's okay. You talk away. I mean, it's a great honor for me to be here. When I got the call, it was, you're not expecting it. I've been retired since 2017, and you kind of slowly move away from that military life. And, you got Facebook and you got some stuff, but for the most part, you kind of slip away. So the phone call was excellent. I came at a great time. I had lots of time on my hands, and so I immediately said yes, and it's been a great honor, and I'm happy to meet you, and you're doing an awesome job.
Sir, I appreciate that.
Of the podcast, and
Thank you.
You are the right man for the right job at the right time.
That's a privilege and a great honor for me to receive those kind words from you. Thank you, sir. This is a team effort, and I couldn't have done it with my crew back there. Shout out to those guys. The guys who are in the editing team, and Major Downey, who's up there, our executive producer, if you will. And what a collaboration with the people that believed in this project, in the regiment, for giving us the money to make it happen. This is so important to share the stories, the service, and to value the member service of what a big community of Royal Canadians.
I agree.
Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
I came in at a time in the Army where you were way, way deep in yours, and I was just beginning mine in 2010. So this is something that's awesome for me to always experience and engage with the generations of Royal Canadians. But today I would love to talk a bit about your book, and talk a bit about your service, and especially your thoughts on being a soldier in the Royal Canadian Regiment. So, sir, can you tell us what made you decide to want to write a book?
That's a tough question for me to answer. I started writing, not necessarily a book, but I started writing the last couple of years of my career. I was working in Ottawa. I was the first group chief for the military police, senior job. And
As an infantry NCO?
Infantry. So the first non-MP group chief, and as of today, it's pretty well any trade. But I was the first. And I found myself kind of lost in Ottawa. I had always said that, I would never go to Ottawa, that I would get out before I'd go to Ottawa, that I didn't want to be part of that system, so to speak. But I did go. And while I was there, my wife started to see some changes in me that I wasn't seeing myself.
What do you mean, sir?
Angry. I got angry a lot. I started wanting to be by myself. Didn't want to kind of interact with my kids. I go to work and I do the bare minimum. And then I'd go home and I'd kind of head to my basement where I'd watch TV, and I wasn't sure why it was happening. I just knew I didn't want to be around people, and I was angry a lot. And one of the issues I've had was that I had a traumatic brain injury in Afghanistan, and I have side effects from that. I have headaches every day, so I wake up every morning with a headache,
Wow.
and I go to bed every night with a headache. And I explain it to some of the young guys and older guys now who drink. And I say, just imagine that worst hangover that you've ever had, the worst. That's how I feel every morning when I wake up. And I take medication to kind of bring it down to a tolerable area. And I take more medication before I go to bed. Uh, so I had short term memory loss. On top of that, I was starting to forget things. So I went and had some cognitive testing done. And I went because of my traumatic brain injury. The last thing I was thinking about was either PTSD or depression or any of those things.
Can you describe what it was in case anybody listening has experienced that? Like what assessment it was that you got done?
So the doctor that I was dealing with in Mom 4, I told him the issues I was having, the forgetting things, the being angry, and the headaches, and he suggested I go to this cognitive testing with 3 days of testing, and it's to see how you are able to handle. Really, it's something young guys will be able to handle much better than I was because there are a lot of puzzles and tricky little drawings, but 2 full days of this stuff and reading a paragraph and having to remember it 20 minutes later, and to kind of assess where you are cognitively, whether that function, that brain function is where it should be in, for me at the time, was a 54-year-old man. So, I even got angry at the testing because it was very frustrating for me. I'm a big reader. I'm a big, I consider myself fairly intelligent. And I was having difficulty remembering some of the stuff. And, they're giving me a 3D puzzle and they're placing it on the table and saying, have a good look at it. Now draw it. And I couldn't draw it. My mind would not allow me to see that puzzle once they turned it over. So I was starting to get angry. And anyway, the testing went on. And a week or so later, my doctor called me in, Dr. Gupta, and he says to me, he says, I got the results back from your testing. He says, not terrible. He says, you definitely have some short-term memory issues, but he says, for somebody your age and your education level, you're pretty good. He said, however, he said, 2 of the psychologists that did your testing have left a note in your file saying that we should have you go see and speak to somebody about perhaps you have PTSD. And it caught me by surprise because I've seen a lot of PTSD. I saw a lot of my soldiers when they got back from Afghanistan who had a PTSD, and I saw the results of it. And I always said, I'm so lucky that I didn't get PTSD. And it wouldn't happen to me. It would happen to other people, but not me. And so I disregarded it when he first told me. When my doctor told me, I actually got up and walked out, which probably was a good sign. Well, I actually got up and left his office. And he called me back a couple of days later. He said, this is important. He said, we really need to talk about it. Maybe it's nothing. But he says, I want you to go speak to someone. And I said, fine, I'll go. And she was probably a lifesaver. I mentioned her name in my book. She was so easy to talk to. And I've never spoken to anybody about that kind of stuff in my life. That wasn't me. I'm an infantry chief at the time. Like, really? That's going to happen. So I was diagnosed at that time with PTSD, depression, and anxiety. And it was all a big surprise to me. And one of the things she asked me to do was to write down some stuff that I was thinking about during the day. Just, no format, just write. So I started doing that, and I found that writing was actually helping me. I'd write what I was thinking about. If I was having a bad day, I'd write about something that happened in Afghanistan. And over the next 3 years, I continued to write. And there was no sequence to it. There was no rhyme or reason to what I was writing. They were just stories, mostly from Afghanistan. And a friend of mine, military police major. He said to me, he said, one day, he said, John, listen, so I see you writing all the time. Can I read it? I go, no. This is very personal. It's not for anybody else to read. And a few weeks later, he's talking to me again. And I said, you really want to read it? I said, you can read it, but don't tell anybody about it. So he took it home. It was about 1,000 pages.
Wow.
And he called me the next morning about 6:30. I was on my way into work. And he said, I haven't gone to bed yet. He said, I was up all night. He said, I cried, I laughed, I was angry. He said, you need to get that out to other people. And that was kind of the first kind of small little thing that
The seed got planted.
And I was really hesitant for most of the time. But eventually, I decided to turn it into a book. And I sat with my wife and we discussed it. We knew it was going to be a long process because it was, at that time, probably 1,200 pages. And a friend of mine who did some of the initial editing said, you're definitely a newfie. And I said, remember though, this was never meant for anybody to read. It was just me typing for hours and hours. Some nights I wouldn't even go to bed. I'd stay up all night and just write. And he said, you had paragraphs that went 2 pages.
Wow.
You had sentences that went full pages. And he said, one of your favorite words is the word and. He said, you must have 10,000 ands in there. So a lot of work. And there's the book. We decided, my wife and I together, that any money that we got from it would be donated. I didn't want any money from it. It's not my story alone. It's the soldier stories.
Right.
So we have donated 100% of all the royalties to Homes for Heroes.
Wow, that's incredible.
That's around $10,000 so far.
That's amazing. Wow, sir. What an honorable endeavor to do, to like donate all the profit that you've made through this, I would argue, like an incredible amount of work that has to go into one, you know, to reflect and to allow yourself to be vulnerable enough to share your story, right? Like we're talking about a person who's an infantry NCO coming from a generation of a time where, being soft and talking about feelings and stuff, that wasn't normal.
Absolutely.
So you are now adapting yourself to your circumstances of where you're at in life and your career, and you allowed yourself to become very vulnerable, which I argue is a challenging thing to do for a man, a person who feels like themselves as a warrior, a soldier, an NCO.
It was tough. And I tell you, my publisher
Yeah.
gave me a call one day, and he was they were probably a couple of months out from getting it ready to put on the market. And he said, I just want you to have an opportunity. He said, if you want to go back over this, because he said, when you wrote it, nobody was ever supposed to read it.
Mm.
And he says, you really place yourself in those pages, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And he always said, you had some names that you may want to think about removing. So I reread the whole book again over a couple of days, and I did make maybe 2 changes. I took a couple of names out because it wasn't meant to cause harm in your stories. And putting a name in here could have caused some harm. So I took out a couple of names, and a huge part of that book is about one of my platoon warrant officers, Frank Mellish. Frank was a good friend of mine, as well as my platoon warrant from PEI. And of course, he was killed in Afghanistan. And I sent the majority of Frank's piece to his wife, Kendra, in PEI before I published it, and said, I just want you to read it because Frank's story is so much a part of me. And I hope that comes out in the book. There were some things that was going on in Frank's life prior to deployment that I got involved in. And when Frank died, I took it personally. And so I wanted her to read it, as she did. And she may have made 2 tiny little changes that she would like to see in there. And then the book went. So all of the stuff I hope that nobody would ever read is still in there. And people get to make whatever they want from it.
That's incredible, sir. When you write with the idea that you have no intention of sharing this story, I think that allows for an interesting delivery
Absolutely.
of your thoughts. Because when you think, hey, no one's gonna see this, this is genuinely 1000% you.
To be honest.
Exactly. And that's hard to do.
It is hard.
Like, we're in the army, we have this culture of like, okay, you gotta be very mindful of your opinion, you know?
Really.
And now when you get out, I wonder, like, I can only imagine it feels very liberating when you can just download yourself
It
and
was
share.
amazing, and
Yeah.
it ended up being the thing that really, really, uh, took me out of my basement, and I always use the term basement, but it took me out of the basement, got me back living with my grandkids and my kids, but it was the book. It was the writing of the book. It was being able to tell that story, which, when I was writing it, nobody was going to read it, so I was just spilling onto those pages, and it was the best thing. It was so therapeutic, and it was absolutely amazing, and I tell young people that I talk to, um, shortly after I published my book, young soldiers that I know, and I'd say, they were having issues, not necessarily post-traumatic stress, but they were having issues with life in general. I said, "Start writing. Just go into your room or into your office and just start writing. Even if you start out with one good thing that happened to me today, something simple,
Yeah.
and see where it leads, because there was no plan for that book, and something that was meant to be a couple of sentences ended up being 1,200 pages of ands and thus."
That's a wonderful, wonderful outcome, of some positive, great things. Sir, so I want to talk about your career because you kind of capture a lot of these details in this book. And for anybody listening here, can you just tell us, like, which battalion did you start your career with?
Yep.
And where?
So I did my basic training in Cornwallis, and then I went to London, Ontario with one RCR.
Wow.
And that is where we did our QL3. So in-house with Duke's Company. And it was 3 platoons of recruits. And we did most of our training in London and in Ipperwash. And then we did our final exercises in Petawawa.
Interesting.
Once we graduated, I stayed with one RCR. And I stayed one RCR.
What year is this?
1981.
1981.
So graduated, and in 1982, we came back from an exercise in Norway, and we were standing on the parade square in London, and the CO came out, and the CO said, "We are looking for about 60 people, soldiers, to go to 3 RCR in Germany. It's a fast ball, so, we're not looking for married people with families. However, we will take them, but we are looking for young soldiers." And 3 RCR at that time in Germany was a very old battalion. It had gone from 3 Met Commando to 3 RCR, and they had never left Germany. Some of them had spent their whole careers in Germany.
Wow.
So there was lots of corporals, but there was no privates. So I threw my hand up. I had no girlfriend. I had no car. I mean, I'll go. I'm ready to go. Pack my bag. I can be leaving tomorrow. So I got selected to go to Germany in July of '82. I went with about 60 other young guys, mostly single, to Germany. And I remember the first day marching down what we called the North Marg, which was part of the airfield, turned into the infantry's home. And all these old corporals and master corporals are all whistling at us and, making some of the weirdest sexual comments you can imagine.
Fresh meat, new guys.
Privates.
Yeah.
Privates. Like, "Ooh, you looking hot there, private." Like, so I don't know what to expect. So 3 RCR. Then I stayed with 3 RCR in Germany till 84. And I got posted to Winnipeg with 3 RCR. So here we are, 3 RCR.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
Winnipeg.
Army of the West.
Yeah.
And the Matricious, the 2nd Battalion Matricious, went to Baden in Germany for 4 years. So I spent 4 years in Winnipeg with 3 RCR. Went from private to master corporal. Um, and then rotated back to Germany in '88 with 3 RCR. Stayed with 3 RCR. Became a sergeant over there. Got married to my wife. Moved her to Germany. And then moved back to Petawawa in '92 when they closed out the base in Germany. And I got posted to brigade headquarters. headquarters in 6th Squadron as the training sergeant. And then
How'd you like that position?
I loved it. I was a young sergeant. I was all full of piss and vinegar. And you get the opportunity to go to the brigade headquarters and deal with mostly signals guys.
Right.
But I was dealing with all the field craft and all of the weapons and all of that type of training. And I was given a lot of freedom, flexibility on how I wanted to do things.
Which is awesome. As a sergeant, to go from master corporal to sergeant and then now get all of this freedom to make decisions.
It was awesome. And they were very receptive to it. And they wanted somebody like an infantry sergeant.
Who had that energy and
Absolutely.
yeah.
And the brigade headquarters noticed it because, you're part of the brigade headquarters and they kind of noticed it. And then I got promoted to warrant officer and got posted back to 1 RCR, where I worked with General Vance. He was the OC of Duke's Company back
Wow.
to Duke's, yeah. And I stayed. I went to Charles Company, and I stayed there. Got promoted to MWO. Did a tour in Meaford in the battle school, and came back and was sergeant major with Charles Company. I was sergeant major there for almost 4 years. So 2 years were up, and I was told, okay, you're moving. And it was the same time that we were getting ready to go to Afghanistan, 2006. So I went and seen the RSM, and I said, hey.
Who was it?
Bobby Gerard. So the chief that was killed in Afghanistan. I said, listen, I've been sergeant major with Charles Company for 2 years. Like, these are my soldiers. I've been training them. Now you're going to send them to Afghanistan with a different sergeant major? You go, well, you know how it is. You got to move in hierarchy, and they're going to go to combat support company. And I said, I want to stay with Charles Company.
Right.
He said, all right, that's what you want. So,
like being in the military, you can't help but, like we say, don't take things personally. Okay, like I've taught courses. You tell the candidates, hey, don't take things personally. It's not like I'm trying to target you as an individual. It's just a game. But when you're training and you're in the context of training for like war, combat operations, I can tell you that things can get personal.
Absolutely.
Right? And you feeling like this is your company.
Absolutely.
As an NCO, as a sergeant major, I could only imagine, because I feel that way as a sergeant, right? I feel like this is my company. It's my platoon. These are my soldiers. I'm responsible for them, for their failures, their successes.
Absolutely.
Right? And all the good and the bad. And you can't help but feel like it's almost wrong for you not to go with them.
That's how I felt. And
Right?
I remember, the first moment that I heard it, I was right into the RSM's office, and they were kind of shocked because, but you're going to combat support. Okay, but that's not where I want to go.
Right.
And I want to stay with my soldiers. And he never argued. He said, okay, that's what you want. And
That's awesome.
trained with them for another 7 months. And then we went to Afghanistan. And when I got back from Afghanistan, I was on leave. And the DSM called me,
And who's that?
Mark Miller. So he took over. Sorry, let me go back. Mark was the DSM. He got promoted to chief and took over from Bobby Gerard. So he was the RSM. And he called me on leave. He said, sorry to call you on leave, John, but what do you think of going to 3 RCR as the DSM? And I go, well, I said, I've only been back a few weeks, and I'm going to admin company as the sergeant major in 1 RCR. So I said, I'm quite happy. Like, if somebody else wants to be DSM, because I knew they were going on tour, which meant I was rear party. I don't really want that. So Mark says, well, I'll give you a day or so to think about it. All right, RSM. 2 hours later, the phone rings. He says, have you had a chance to think about it? Well, it's only been 2 hours. He goes, listen, your posting message will be cut tomorrow. You're going to 3 RCR as the DSM. Okay. And so I went to 3 RCR, and I stayed there for 2 years, and that was kind of my last regimental position.
How did you feel going into that position?
I was a little torn because 3 RCR was getting ready to go. They had a lot of soldiers who'd been to Afghanistan, mostly Kabul. But they had a lot of individuals who had never been to Afghanistan, a lot of NCOs. And I was going over there, the idea that I was given was, you're going over there to be the DSM, to kind of sort out some issues discipline-wise, but you're also the expert on Afghanistan. And it was early after the tour, and I was probably trying to forget a lot of stuff. And that kind of brought it all back to the forefront when I went to 3 RCR. Wasn't something I would have asked for, to be honest. And rear party, in some ways, rear party was probably as difficult or more difficult than combat to me. You're knocking on that door at 6 o'clock in the morning and looking at this 26-year-old woman who looks out the bedroom window in her nightdress and looks down at 6 o'clock in the morning, and you're standing there with the OC of rear party. She knows why we're there. She comes downstairs and she's already screaming. And we have to tell her that her husband has been killed in Afghanistan. She's got a 4-month-old baby on her hip and she's screaming. The Padre is there. That was probably the most difficult thing I've ever had to do, was look at that young, innocent baby in the arms of that young wife. And we just told her that her husband had been killed in Afghanistan. So the OC and I did several goes. And in some ways, they were more haunting than losing soldiers. It was that difficult.
Yeah, the burden of leadership and responsibility to have to execute that task, that is like it's very hard to prepare someone to have to do that.
You really, I mean, they send you on this little course so that, kind of gives you the idea of how to do it. The moment you knock on that door, all that stuff is gone out the window. And it's just you, the OC, Padre, and the assisting officer who's hiding down the street. That's tough, and that's the one I remember the most.
What would you say to yourself if you could like talk to yourself at that time? Like, would you say any advice? Is there anything you could say?
Be as compassionate as you can, but be as straightforward as you can. One of the things they teach you on this little course, and it makes so much sense. The last thing you want to do when that lady, that wife, opens that door to say, listen, there's been an incident in Afghanistan. Some soldiers were injured, or haven't got all the details yet. And by the way, your husband's dead. You don't drag that out. The first thing you do is tell her that her husband was dead. Because otherwise you're leaving hope where there is no hope. And the longer you drag it out, the worse it is. And but be compassionate. And they are family. They're part of our family. And that is something that I think this regiment was really good at for a long time, even before all of the Afghanistan stuff. And I think this regiment was really good at looking after families. And I hope that continues, because it is important.
I think it's absolutely important. We pay a lot of attention to our careers and our colleagues, as we put a lot of energy into focusing on career progression and skill development and trying to find things that can be meaningful to us. But sometimes you can forget every now and then, get some tunnel vision, that there's a lot of support coming from behind you from back home. A lot of patience from our partners back home, our significant others that endure so much hardship, especially when we leave. And for somebody like yourself who went to war, like you tell the context of war to anybody, they understand death,
Sure.
right?
Yeah.
And it's something that is so difficult for a partner to do, is to try to go on with their lives
It is tough.
with not knowing
Absolutely.
if their partner is going to come back, because that is a challenge in itself. And we sometimes get caught up, and it's good to remind ourselves and remind the troops that you have a family out there and they're important
They need to be looked after.
and they need to be looked at.
I remember when I came back on leave from Afghanistan, and I escorted Sergeant Darcy Teffert's body back, one of my sergeants that was killed just before I was leaving on leave. And I remember coming home and trying to enjoy leave with the kids and then my wife. And it was tough. But leaving and going back was much harder than the first time I went, because we already lost several soldiers. This was no secret anymore what we were doing. And having to say goodbye to your family when they know, and I'd already been injured. They already knew I had been in the hospital and I was injured. Saying goodbye now when they so understood what I was getting myself into was really tough. And I remember my kids telling me, my daughter especially, they were in grades, I want to say 9 or 8 and 10, I believe, 7 and 9. Here in Petawawa on base, the high school used to be across from mechanics on base. And my daughter said to me one day, she goes, the hardest thing was when somebody knocked on the door to school, because a lot of the times they were calling a kid out of the classroom to let them know that their father had been killed or whooped it. She goes, kids would start throwing up in her class. She just had a knock on the door. The first couple of times on my tour, she said that they went over the PA system and said, Joey so-and-so and Reese so-and-so, can you come to the office? And then the rest of the kids would find out, their parents or father was killed. So they stopped using the PA system, but they knock on the door. And a friend of mine told me that two of his kids were diagnosed with PTSD. They were teenagers, 13 and 14, I think. And they were diagnosed with PTSD from just being on the base and seeing the flag at half-mast and being in a school where a friend's father was killed. And so, yeah, we sometimes forget the impact, not only war, but the impact of our careers on our spouses.
Yeah,
And
definitely.
it's important that we don't forget that.
Would you describe anybody's role at the regiment in the battalion to be somebody that should take care of that responsibility of ensuring that we're looking after the families? Does it fall on any one person's shoulders? Is it a
Yeah, and I hear what you're saying, and I don't think it does. I'll tell you an example. I could say it's the adjutant's job or it's the DSM's job because he's typically the guy that's on repartee, or, uh, you know, Colonel Lavoy, who was the CO of RCR, he made it his responsibility. And he told us all that. He said, I am taking the responsibility to make sure your families are looked after. And he says, I need your help. But he says, it's my responsibility. And he took it very serious. And I remember one day at a battalion dismissal, Colonel Leroy walked out and he was mad. And he said, I was talking to some wives, he said, at the Canics, and I was telling them about the family day on Saturday because they didn't know about it. How come they didn't know about it? The old guys were in town, right? So, excuse me, he started sending individual letters to the homes,
wow?
briefing the spouses on what was coming up,
Yeah.
when the training was, how long their wives would be away, because they weren't telling them. Typical soldiers. They're not, oh yeah, I'm on exercise. I'll leave next month. How long are you gone for? I don't know, a few weeks. Okay, that could be 5 weeks in Wainwright.
Right.
Right? So he took it on. So yeah, I mean, it's everybody's responsibility, but it's good to have that leadership who kind of says, this is how we're going to do it.
Absolutely.
They are important.
Like the CO, the RSM, they kind of set the
Absolutely.
tone,
Well,
right? And they kind of will influence everyone else's behavior and how they would go about it. Um, and that's amazing that at the time, Lieutenant Colonel Omar Lavoy
yeah.
was invested into the
Absolutely.
network of the family.
And he's ever said Bobby Gerard. Bobby was a friend of mine. I've known him for years in Germany, and he was a big family member.
Can you tell us a bit about him?
Typical thing when you ask somebody about somebody who died is, he's the best ever. And people are, yeah, you see that about everybody. Bobby was the best. And he was such a great guy. I mean, not only did he become a great RSM, he was just a great person. His personality, people just kind of came to him. And he would bring a smile to your face no matter how bad things were. Didn't matter. And when you came in the morning to start PT, you're coming in, I always came in about 6:30, 4 to 7, read the paper, had a coffee. He'd already be there every morning. And he would stand on the rail out here overlooking the stairs, and he would say hello to every soldier that went by. Didn't matter if you were a private or a lieutenant colonel. He said hi to you and how you doing and had word for you, and people would gravitate to him. He'd walk out and there'd be, 8 or 10 privates standing around and talking to him because he was one of those types of people. And when he got killed in Afghanistan, I mentioned it in my book. We're in CAF getting ready for a ramp ceremony. And I would run into the sergeant major of the artillery or a warrant officer in the armor. And they'd say, he's our RSM too. He says, it's I understand the regiment and the RCR, what a great loss, but it's our loss too. And people are forgetting that. He was my RSM. I may be armored, but he was my RSM. Or I was engineer and he was my RSM, and the soldiers of the engineer regiment loved him. And words like that you wouldn't really expect to hear on the airfield in Kandahar. So that's kind of what he was. He was one of those types of people.
Just a powerful person.
And such a nice person, like a nice guy.
Yeah. You know what's interesting? I found some of the best leaders. They were some of the most compassionate ones, the ones who made you feel like a person sometimes,
Absolutely.
made you feel like you were important,
Yeah,
and just the little things matter.
sure. And I
And
mean, he could be a disciplinarian. He had to be.
yes,
He could be that. But 95% of the time, he was a compassionate, smiling, friendly guy who everybody in the battalion really, really liked. And you don't get too many of those.
it hits hard when you lose somebody like that. Um, when I work in the platoon level context, and sometimes one of our members, they get posted. And that can be challenging in itself. And I could only imagine, like, when we feel a type of sadness when you lose one of your good buddies, who kind of plays a role in being the heart of the tribe, the platoon. Somebody as an RSM is so influential, can be so influential, that I can only imagine it devastates the morale.
It was a tough time for the battle group. It really was. And like I say, it affected everybody, not just the sergeant majors and, the privates. Everyone was devastated when they heard that their RSM had been killed.
It's like a family,
It was. And, it was the same way we felt about, the two warrant officers that we lost in Charles County. Both of them, Frank Mellies and Rick Nolan were both those types of guys. And they were both from down east. Frank was a PEI and Rick Nolan was an implanted. And they were very similar to Bobby Gerard in that sense. Very personable people. People just liked them. They were hard chargers. And, Frank Mellies loved the regiment. And he loved the history. But he also loved being a soldier. And he loved his soldiers. He loved being a platoon warrant. And when they died, it was devastating. It wasn't just another guy. It was somebody that really, really stood out in the regiment.
Sir, I'm so glad I have an opportunity to have somebody here who can speak to these people, who can share with my generation and the generations after me that are serving right now in the battalions, for us to understand that these people, that these names, these photos that we may see on the walls, or we recognize on Remembrance Day of our legacy figures of the regiment and the battalion that we're in. These were real people. These were incredible people, powerful people, and it's a reminder that this is the reality of what we do as infantry soldiers, and the price that we may have to pay, and be expected to carry on. Um, I love talking about this stuff because I hope that for people watching, especially those that are not from the regiment, that get a chance to see this interview, they recognize that the incredible personalities that are in the battalions, that sometimes it's hard to understand that why don't we see this in the rest of the army? The hardship, the training, the suffering, the emotional stress and the trauma that goes on. It creates some of the most incredible human beings, the best leaders I've ever seen. I don't know. Sometimes I'm so thankful when I walk into the office because I don't do this job for the money. It's not about the money to me, but I can tell you that the people that I get to interact with, that I get to call my colleagues, that I get to call my superiors, my subordinates, these are such amazing people that have chosen to sacrifice so much of their life, to be together, to do these great things when the country calls and asks
I
us to
agree.
do it.
I agree 100%.
And I love how you reference that, the great Canadians that are in this
We
book.
don't give them the credit.
Yeah.
These were great Canadians. Not only the guys that were killed in that, all of those soldiers fought so bravely in Afghanistan. They put their lives on the line for each other, for the mission, and they were true Canadians. They weren't special. They were just typical Canadians. Most of them were young boys who came from all across this country, who turned out to be warriors. And we sometimes forget that these are just young kids in most cases. 19, 20, 21 years old. They are just somebody's son, somebody's boyfriend, uh, somebody's father, and we have a tendency of looking at them as warriors. And they were warriors, but they were so much more than warriors. I mean, that's what they showed in Afghanistan, and we always are concerned, I think, especially in the regiment and in the army, especially when you get on places like Facebook, where all the experts are kind of living and dwelling in their cellars. They talk about how the regiment and the army have kind of lost that warrior ethos, and they no longer have warriors, and they're so far from the truth. They're so far from the truth. And they don't know what warriors are until they put them in a position to be warriors.
Yes.
And we would sit in conference rooms like this, and we'd be mirroring our soldiers, and we'd say, Corporal so-and-so, he's not a bad guy, but, he's always friggin' mouthing off, and he's a shit disturber, and, let's keep him low. We don't want him to be kind of shining. And he ends up being the guy that was one of our greatest warriors on the battlefield. And, people were ready to write him off because he wasn't fitting that mold in garrison. And, I would say some of our greatest warriors are folks that don't want to be in garrison. They want to be in the field. They want to be on tour. And we all can look around and see the guys that enjoy garrison life. They kind of like that life, and they'd be happy not to go on exercise. But the warriors want to go.
When we get to deploy overseas on operations, I've gotten to do 3 expeditionary operations, all of them different, but I would argue that some of the best quality of experiences in my professional life in terms of feeling like what I'm doing is important and significant, like I have purpose, to feel like all in. Like I'm all in and there's no distractions.
Absolutely.
There's no nothing. It's just this duty, this job, this task I have to execute for the next 6 months, or however long I'm here, and nothing else matters. There's something beautiful that happens when you can fully commit yourself to a mission or a task.
I agree. That's why it's so important to make sure the family is
Yes.
out.
Yes.
So you can go do that.
No.
I mean, especially on the early tours to places like Bosnia and even during the Gulf War, getting those phone calls because somebody in Germany, a wife living in Germany, went to Roto Zero in Bosnia, had no car, didn't have access to a bank account, on her own. The young girl from Cape Breton who married about 6 months before her husband deployed, and he just deployed. He was all excited about deploying, except they left this young girl from Cape Breton without a car, without money, and they had to bring him home. So you have to make sure that family is sorted out and then go be a warrior. And that's why it's always good to be ready. It's no good of waiting until you get the warning order. It's too late.
Very well said,
I
sir.
remember, this story is kind of funny now. My wife, I don't know if she's forgiven me, but it's something that she's lived with. We came back from the Gulf War, and we were only back a few months, and I was with my company.
Where were you exactly, sir?
So in Qatar.
Qatar.
Qatar. And the tour was about 4 months, I guess. When we got back, I was a sergeant. I got sent off on the advanced driver course, law course, and topped it. Became the top candidate. Well, it was in the armor school, so an infantry sergeant should be topping it. So I go back to Germany, and 3 RCRs gearing up for Roto Zero in Bosnia. There's supposed to be 2 companies going, Oscar Company and November Company.
What'd they tell you about the mission? Do you remember?
I don't really remember. All I know is that the words, what we were told is be prepared for anything. This is not going to be Cyprus. This is going to be nasty. Like, be prepared to be fighting.
Okay.
But I wasn't going. I was in my company. I just got back from the Gulf. So November and Oscar were going. And the transport sergeant for November Company, a Newfoundlander, and a friend of mine named Steve Jeans. He passed away a few years ago. Great young sergeant at the time. And I was walking up from the North Mar to the headquarters, and I met him. And he's all pissed off. And I go, "What's wrong, Steve?" He goes, "They're sending me on my 6B course." I go, "That's great." I said, "You have less time than me, and you're going on your wars course. That is great for your career." But he said, "I wanted to go to Bosnia." He said, "They're taking me off the Roto as a transport sergeant." I said, "That's terrible." So he left, and I beelined it True story. It's in the book. I beelined it.
The target of opportunity.
Sergeant Major November Company, a guy named Rick Clark. He doesn't know me from a hole in the ground. I walk in, I snap to attention, and he's doing.
So you're walking into the sergeant major's office. He doesn't know who the hell you are.
And I snap to attention. He looks up and he goes, "What do you want, Barnes?" I go, "I'm your new transport sergeant." He goes, "What?" He said, "I just told Jeans 5 minutes ago that he wasn't going." I said, "No, I just ran into him." I said, "You're not going to find a better transport sergeant." I said, "No, I topped my driver's course."
Mm.
And he goes, "Does your sergeant major know you're here?" I said, "He doesn't, sir, because I just heard." But I said, "I'm sure he'd be good with it." And he said, "Get out of my office." So away I go. I go back down to North Market, but an hour later, the phone rings. It's my sergeant major, a guy by the name of George Leach. He says, "Barnes, come up and see me." And I'm thinking, this is it. I'm hung out to dry. So I walk up.
Wait, what do you mean? Like, what do you think?
I think I'm done. I think he's going to be yelling and screaming and spitting.
Was this guy a scary figure?
He was. He could be very, very rude and loud. And he was one of those guys, wrong side. So I step to attention. His door. He says, "Get in there." So I walk in. He says, "Did you go see Sergeant Major November Company?" I said, "I did." I said, "I saw an opportunity." I said, "They're looking for a transport sergeant, and I'm the guy." He goes, "Barnes, you got some setting nuts on you." He says, "Start clearing in the November Company."
What? Well,
so I go home that evening, and of course I lied to my wife. She goes, "What do you mean you're going to a body? You just got back from the Gulf." I said, "No." I said, "I got called today, and they needed a transport sergeant, and I got selected." Many years later, as I'm writing this book, and she's perusing the pages before it was published, she reads that. And this is 25, 30 years later. I don't know, 25 years later.
a lifetime later.
And she's angry. She'd be angry now. It's been too long. She was not happy. Because I went, because she knew what kind of agenda that was, because I lied to her.
That's incredible. That's incredible. I can't say I can 100% relate, but last year I'm serving with the RCR my company. I just rotated. Actually, the story goes I deployed on Operation Unifier. It's our training mission with the Ukrainians. I was a master corporal CQ2IC for Oscar Company. So we deployed, great deployment. I got to teach courses. It was a fantastic deployment. I got back after 6 months. And then I'm in my company. We're training. We just get out of like our level 3 training exercises. This has been like about 4 weeks of range time. And finally, I'm supposed to have like a good, steady, down slope, chill next few weeks, right? I'm expecting to go on my basic mortars course, as Sergeant Major told me. So I'm like, I got it all lined up until Christmas. It's all smooth sailing, right? And then one day I get pulled out of my office. It's a Wednesday. And to give you some context, this is leading up to Thanksgiving weekend. We're already told that we're going to get the Friday off and the Monday off. So this is Wednesday. I'm thinking that's it, baby. Tomorrow is basically the last day at work and 4-day long weekend. Let's go. And then my warrant pulls me out of the office. And he's an incredible guy. Shout out to Warrant Officer Frankie Debian. He pulls me out of the office and he's like, and a few of us actually, and he's like, "I don't know what the hell is going on, but the regiment or the battalion is being tasked to send a section of force protection, and I don't know where they're going, but you're escorting the Air Force, and you're either going to Florida or Lebanon."
Oh, well, there's a choice.
Right? And so I understand that all of you people have commitments and engagements, like you're supposed to be on courses or whatever. But I'm here to ask you, because you are right now DAG green. You are considered already on deployable status because of all of your admin is squared away still.
Good.
And so we get pulled out. He goes around individually to all of us. Do you want to go? We don't know where you're going or how long you're going for or what you're going to do, but are you in? And yes, are you thinking about it? I'm like, yes. Yes, I look at the guy next to me, this private. I'm like, it's a yes, buddy. Right? I'm like, I just made the answer for him. I'm like, you don't have to think, buddy. Like, this deployment is the one where, like, guys kind of dream for, right? Because you don't know. This is like the Call of Duty's going on, and this could be anything, buddy. So it's a yes. And everyone's like, yes, 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 yes. Long story short, there was like an NHL, NFL draft going on that night because the people who got initially told that they're going got changed like 3-4 times. I don't know. But long story short, I got told the next day, which is the last day of the week that you're going. Tuesday. Like, it's not confirmed, but Tuesday, everyone's talking about Wheels Up.
And there may be others who are not.
Right.
The Sydney happened to me.
Right.
I had said earlier there was 2 companies going, right? Oscar and November Company,
Right.
000 to Bosnia. Shortly after I got put in the November Company, it got changed. And Oscar Company got melded into November, one headquarters, more soldiers. So the transport sergeant from Oscar Company says, "Why is Barnes going? I'm staying behind." Like, he was not happy. I don't know, buds. Like, don't ask me. I just got told, you know what I mean? He was not, he didn't go, and I did. But, at the time, that's what I wanted. I was all about doing the business. I'm not training all this time to hang around garrison.
Right.
I want to go, and if I get the opportunity, I was going.
Hell yeah.
And even if it meant lying to my wife. Really, really, real sorry about it.
So my story goes, when I got home that day, I'm like, baby, because I have a girlfriend right now, my significant other. She's wonderful. Shout out, Katie. Love you. And so when I got home that day, I'm like, so, babe, yeah, so Frankie called us out of the office today, and he said, and we don't know, but he said that there is a deployment coming down. We don't know where we're going, but we might have to help Canadians that are in need. And this could be somewhere like Lebanon. It could be Florida. And he asked me if I would go as the sergeant, and I said yes. She said, "You said yes?" I said yes. Yes. Why wouldn't I say yes, babe? Of course, right? She's like, "No, you just got..." Oh, and I caught it. I caught some fury that day.
I should have done that.
Yeah.
I would have been better off in the long term.
All right. So maybe get it right away then instead of later. But yeah, I can relate in that sense of you got to tell, well, your partners are going to endure it. And it's so hard. It's so hard to be in a position in a job where we spend most of our career getting ready. We spend most of our career getting ready. And so you can't help but feel that you want to execute.
Absolutely.
You want to be at the tip of the spear.
You're waiting.
Right?
Opportunity.
Our job description hasn't changed, I think, in like generations, and I think we all think about it, that if the call comes that we want to go.
I mean, I think during Afghanistan, it was the happiest time I've seen soldiers. Even though we were having soldiers that had issues and, too many tours.
Yeah.
But as a whole, as a battalion, I think it was the happiest time I've ever seen of a battalion. Because they knew, they were focused. You were either going to Afghanistan, you were coming back from Afghanistan, or you were training to go for the next one.
A person had so much purpose and meaning where life was, you could argue, simple. Like, this is what life is about. And I can't help but think, I love history. I love reading about it and reading like campaigns of previous eras, Canadian, or if we're talking like the World Wars, for example, these long extended campaigns until the war was over. And wow, I can't even fathom how I could relate with the idea that we're going and we're not coming back until we're done or dead. And wow, what a situation to be in. But for people to rotate in and out of Afghanistan, I was fortunate enough to read another book by Steve Macbeth. I don't know if you finished. Incredible book. No names, no pack drill, and so many stories of great Canadians expressing their opinions and expressing their story.
And in some ways, it reminded me of me writing this book when nobody was going to read it.
Yeah.
Because there was no names.
Yeah.
They could be honest. Like, some of those stories would never have been told like they were told if it had to be, Sergeant Barnes says this.
Yeah.
Right? So it makes a big difference. And that book really touched me because a lot of those stories are from 2006.
Yeah.
A lot of them. And there may be no names on them, but I know who they are. You know what I mean? Like, I know those soldiers who's telling those stories. So it had a kind of a personal feeling for me when I read that book.
And for all of us listening and me being here, being able to sit with you, this is educational. This is community service. This is the honorable thing to do for us, to respect the service of our community. It's a community of Canadians. It's a community of infantry soldiers who have banded together to do incredible things in their careers. People that have served for a short amount of time, people who have served for a long amount of time, people who served at the lowest ranks, and people who served at the most highest ranks. Everyone's contributions are important and they matter. And to be able to sit down, share your service and your story, this is incredibly educational. This is incredible professional, personal development for us. Being a soldier is something that is so demanding, and looking back at your career, you can't help but feel the amount of effort and energy you put into it. This is our identity, and it's something that I don't know how I'm gonna go about it. I know it's gonna be challenging for me to one day come to terms with building a new identity.
Yep.
After my service.
But we all go there, and we all find a way to do it. And you see, that book really helped me. And it wasn't even really, even though the book is about my career in many ways, it's not my story. It's my soldier stories. And one of the things from a young master corps, one of the things I always said was that in order to be a good leader, you have to promote your soldiers. You don't do it for yourself to look good. If you do it for yourself, then you're not in it for the right reason. It's your soldiers that you should be spreading the wealth on. How good they are, how good you are. If you're a leader, be a leader. But make sure the soldiers get the recognition. And I've always done that throughout my career. And I hope I did it in the book, which is why I mentioned so many names in the book, because they deserve to be known.
Yes.
And their stories deserve to be known.
I love that you said that. Yesterday, I got an opportunity to write an article. My OC asked me to write an article for the Pro Patriot Journal for my company, and when I sent it to him, it's a very like a big detailed description of the deployment I got to do, Operation Globe, and when I wrote this, I knew that there's a very good chance a lot of it's going to get cut down and trimmed, as things do when you submit.
For sure.
But the OC spoke to me today, and when I initially sent it to him, I had a little blurb in the beginning just for him before he read my actual entry in my draft. Was that, sir, it was hard for me to make this short. I felt like I owed it to my soldiers, and I owed it to those I served with on this mission, to detail it as much as possible, to do them justice, so that one day we could look back at this and to share what is being asked of soldiers post Afghanistan in the operational environment. And I felt like it was important to detail this. But he came up to me today and he's like, "Hey, listen, as you may understand, we had to trim it for the Pro Patriot Journal, but the regiment's interested in trying to push it up to the Army to maybe have the full version disclosed." And that's where I had names. I included the names.
Of course.
And then I emailed my soldiers after I sent it to them. So maybe when they get to see the email, they'll see that I wrote to them. I wanted you to see this, the draft version that I submitted, so you see your names are entered in here, so that one day when you look back at this, you can be proud that you did this, that you stood up for your country. I thought that was important.
I think that's a tough time for you guys today, because Afghanistan took all the year out of it. And I mean, it honestly did.
Yeah, it did.
Afghanistan took all the year out of the room. And it almost became, when I was still here, it almost became like the folks that were in Afghanistan, the folks that weren't. And everything was about Afghanistan.
Oh, yeah.
All the stories were about Afghanistan. All the soldiers were getting honors and awards, and invited to dinners, and invited to sports events. And boy, got 5 free tickets to Sens games, and these 5 Afghan vets. And they sucked all the air out of the room. And it was probably the toughest time for new soldiers.
Oh, yeah.
To come into the battalions.
Sir, I was thinking about the same thing with me and my buddies. We were thinking about how hard it could have been to join the Army after World War II.
Oh, can't even imagine.
Oh my God. Imagine like the culture of it. People talk about the culture of the Legion. And I don't know if this is a confirmed theory, but there's a theory that the Legion saw so much shift in its membership because of people gateguarding from an era that was so recognized for its service, that for you to join after it, it's like you were always going to be some B-class kid. No matter what you did, no matter how awesome you were, you didn't go over. You didn't go do the business. You don't have the campaign stars. And
True.
fuck, man, this is a tribal organization, and sometimes it's our downfall. Fuck, I don't know. It's hard.
But it absolutely was how it was.
I joined in 2010, so I got there thinking I was going to go to Afghanistan. I was one of those people who didn't, and I lived in the shadow of Afghanistan. And sometimes I was glad because I was 18. I looked
Sure.
up to these people like they were fucking heroes. And I thought, you know what they were? They were to me. I didn't know shit about role models. I didn't know anything about having heroes in my life. I thought I did, but then I joined the army and then I met like real heroes. And I was just admired, and I didn't mind being a B class soldier and thinking I won't be as great as these guys. I never had to go. I was young. I was dumb. I was naive.
True, right?
You know, of course
You
not.
guys have your own stories,
Right.
your own heroes, and
Yes.
own. I mean, you guys are living a different time,
Yeah.
just as important,
Yeah.
just as important as anything that was done in Afghanistan. And sometimes we need to remember that as veterans of Afghanistan, because we weren't the beginning and the end of all.
Right.
We just happened to be lucky ones that were there during Afghanistan. And I guarantee you, most of the soldiers in this battalion today would give pretty well anything to get an opportunity to go into combat.
Oh, yeah.
They will never tell you that. Or they might. They will never tell their families that, probably.
We have that famous cliche, if you will, situation dictates. And for some of us, and for actually all of us, our careers are often dependent on the situation of what's happening in the
Absolutely.
world, right?
There was more careers made during Afghanistan than any other era of my career. And I joined in the early 80s, almost instantaneously. And probably not necessarily the first roto, maybe Kabul, but definitely starting in Kandahar, careers were made. And people who were probably not even on the radar were all of a sudden being highlighted. And rightfully so, don't get me wrong. Some of these guys did amazing, amazing things in Afghanistan, but it changed our culture. Because I believe, around that time, there was still a lot of, I call it mess etiquette, in the sense that a lot of people were being promoted from the mess. And, you're in the clique, you were the guy's friends, a lot of guys were getting promoted, and, there was some hard feelings left behind. How's this happening? Afghanistan changed that.
Right.
It took those folks and either made them come forward and be leaders, or a lot of those folks just disappeared. They got out, they retired, and they moved on.
There was a reality check.
There was. Absolutely there was. And folks stepped up.
How did that feel for you? Did it hit where like, did your perception of like being in the army change a bit once you guys understood we're going to combat?
Oh, for sure. No, absolutely did. And it had to change.
Yeah.
Because we were living in you kind of listen to the news and you listen to the politicians, and Canada was a peacekeeping nation. That's what we were known for, peacekeeping. And we would say, listen, I was on Roto Zero in Bosnia. I was under artillery, mortar fire, sniper fire. I wasn't a peacekeeping soldier. That's not peacekeeping. You might want to call it peacemaking, maybe. I don't. But it changed our view of our own soldiers and ourselves. And it was tough trying to sell that initially to Canadian population. It did eventually.
Was it tough to sell it to the rest of the army?
But it was, absolutely was.
Because how many people had that? Because a lot of rotations went to Bosnia, but how many of them experienced what you experienced? And then, like, how do you sell it to the rest of the organization of the army that's so big that probably isn't rotating in at the tactical level like you are? And some people made their careers in just peace.
Sure.
Like, never going through that.
And peacekeeping was important. And in those days, peacekeeping was something that Canada was recognized for. And people always say, Canadian soldiers are not peacekeepers, but the only people that can be peacekeepers are Canadian soldiers. And, it kind of makes you think, is that true? In some ways, it probably is. You couldn't just take a bunch of civvies up the street and make them peacekeepers. You have to be, I believe, already a warrior to be a peacekeeper, especially if you're going into places like, Bosnia, in 1992, 93, 94, and all those tours, the opportunity was there to um, end up in some sort of, uh, commotion, whether it was, sniper fire, pocket, or the Patricias were, um, in Devar in 1998 when uh, 3,000 or 4,000 Serb civilians decided they were coming home. And we pretty well destroyed everything, killed the mayor of the town, and a bunch of soldiers from my company and from Recce Platoon and Pioneer Platoon were kind of stuck in between these thousands of uh, very angry folks who decided to come home. It's not an easy thing to do, and peacekeeping is difficult because in combat you have a way of handling that kind of stuff, and people don't necessarily in combat, the foe wouldn't necessarily treat you like that. But when the civilian population know the rules and they know what peacekeepers can and can't do, they can push the line pretty hard. And then people will kind of stand back and take a lot of shit, literally. So it was. I mean, I think it woke a lot of people up and people realized that times are changing. Times are changing. And the military has to change with it, and I think we did pretty quickly. We learned some hard lessons early, and some lessons that probably didn't have to be learned. But you spend many, many, many years peacekeeping, peacemaking, and then all of a sudden you're in a war zone. Some quick lessons need to be learned, and they were, but we lost some good people along the way.
Definitely solidifies the lesson when you lose people. And I really hope, like, in our training that we can really do our best to provide as realistic as and as the best quality training that we can to our
So
people.
important.
It's so important to try to prepare them as best as we can.
And I always say to my soldiers in Afghanistan, we talk about it afterwards, and they say that training was so important because when the shit hit the fan, when everybody was terrified, when people were dying, training kicked in, and you weren't, you weren't necessarily afraid anymore. You were scared. That training kicked in, and you just did it because you were so used to doing it, and that comes from training over and over and over again, but trained properly. And we learned that early in Afghanistan that the training had to be brought up. I mean, running around with blanks in your rifle
Yeah.
is not a good way to train for combat.
And I think I'd like to highlight right now that, the t-shirt that you're wearing right now, just for VC. I just want to give you an opportunity to describe it right now, if you don't mind.
Yeah, so Jess La Rochelle was a private in Charles Company in 2006. And October 14th, I was actually getting ready to go on leave, and I was at FOB Strong Point Center with the company headquarters and 9 Platoon, Charles Company. And early that morning, one of our labs hit an IED, and we started taking some small arrows fire. Uh, Colonel Lavoie, with his 9er TAC, showed up and into the position. And the first question was, Barnes, why are you here? You have a helicopter landing in Patrol Base Wilson in 30 minutes. Get up there. You're going. I said, I want to cancel my leave. Like, stuff's happening right now. I can't go. He goes, no, you're going. So as I was leaving in the back of the lab, the strong point was starting to take fire. I got in a helicopter, and as I'm flying over, I'm listening on the radio in the helicopter, and I'd already learned that quickly, within minutes, how we'd lost a couple of soldiers from my company, at a large organized group was attacking. So when I landed in
How does that feel being in the helicopter flying
terrible.
away? Your company's getting attacked.
Well, and then I was laying in a hospital bed when the friendly fire happened with the A-10, and it was devastating. And here, once again, I'm flying over the position listening, and I'm in a helicopter,
Helpless.
helpless, and I wanted to get back out, and it was just terrible. And I land in CAF, and the ops ward picks me up and drives me over to the CP in CAF, And I go inside, and the officer says, I said, I know, we lost soldiers. He goes, yeah. Uh, and when he mentioned Sergeant Tedford's name, I had spoken to Sergeant Tedford just before I left. And he had just got back the night before from leave. And he said what a great time he had to leave with his wife and his kids. And he was killed. But during that battle, just our shell was in a machine gun OP, and he was by himself. The platoon was way under strength because of leave, people coming and going. One of the labs had been hit, which resulted in a sergeant and a young soldier being killed. Our shell kind of was stuck out on his own, and he fired all the ammunition from the C6, fired his rifle, and then fired a volley of, I'm not sure, 12 or 15 M72s at the enemy, and basically blunted the attack himself. And after the attack, when they went to find him up in the OP, he was surrounded by empty tubes, shell casings, clips. The bunker had been blown up, the roof was off of it, and just said, I'm okay. He says, I'm okay. Just leave me here for now until we know everything is good and deal with everything else that's going on. He was a young private. And once everything was sorted out, they went back to CAF the next morning. And La Rochelle was part of the carry party for the ramp ceremony. And once that was done, he went to see the doctors, and he had broken vertebrae in his neck. His retina had been detached, collapsed lung, and he told nobody until after the ramp ceremony. And he was awarded the second highest award, the Star of Military Valor for bravery. And during that time, there was a lot of bravery that was going on. There was all kinds of Canadian heroes. These young soldiers were doing magnificent things under fire, getting wounded, dragging their buddies across open fields under machine gun fire. Lots of awards were being given out, and I think it kind of worried the senior leadership, perhaps, and worried the politicians that we were awarding too many awards. And General Hillier was the CDS at the time, and he and his party in Ottawa decided that the Star of Military Valor was the appropriate award for La Rochelle. A few years later, a petition was started by some soldiers from Charles Company who got General Hillier retired to kind of lead the effort and say that we should have looked at this better. We should have looked at it harder. We should have done better. Just La Rochelle deserved the Victoria Cross, and he should have been Canada's Victoria Cross winner. And that went on for several years, and this T-shirt is part of that effort to get him the VC. And General Hillier is still today fighting for this. Unfortunately, a few years ago, young Jess La Rochelle died at the age of 40. He was found deceased in his workshop at his home that he shared with his mother. La Rochelle never really thrived after Afghanistan. His physical and mental injuries really affected him for the remainder of his life. And he did a few interviews over the years, but for the most part, he was solitude with his mom. And he will never know if he will be awarded the VC or not. The effort is still going on. A change of government could help. We will see. But right now, he has been awarded the second highest Medal of Bravery for a Canadian soldier in Afghanistan.
His story is so important to our regimental community, and trying to recognize the soldiers who have paid so much of their blood and their sweat, and for our country.
Absolutely. And Jess was one of those young soldiers that I kind of mentioned earlier. He didn't stand out in a crowd. Uh, Jess wouldn't be the guy that people would kind of gravitate to. He wasn't that loud kind of person who took lead and he was a young private from Ontario, quiet for the most part, but with a very sincere sense of humor. He could find ways to make his friends, the soldiers, laugh at the most inopportune time. And my few dealings with young La Rochelle in Petawawa uh, were me having to jack him up for something. But he was one of those soldiers that you could jack him up, and an hour later he would smile and chat with him. You don't hold grudges. And so, yeah, he went to Afghanistan as just a young private, and he became a Canadian hero because the opportunity uh, occurred while he was alone in a machine gun bunker.
It's like these acts of courage that happen without no one's thinking about trying to be courageous. They're just doing what they think is right. They're just trying to help their buddies. And they're just trying to do their best to take care of their buddies and to not let them down. And what happens sometimes when we hear these stories is like incredible what people can do when they rise up and
Absolutely.
the things they'll do for their friends in combat. I've never like I'm just so thankful to be part of the legacy of this regiment because it gives me an idea of what human beings are capable of doing at their greatest, their finest moments. And it gives us an idea that this is something to strive for, to hopefully one day when my time comes, if it does come, that I hope I could demonstrate even an ounce of that courage in those moments, and I hope I am not self.
Sure you will. And, that's something that soldiers, especially early on in Afghanistan, including myself, at those moments when you're sitting alone at home
Yeah.
and you wonder, because you know what's going on now.
Yeah.
This is no secret anymore. I'm watching TV and learning about, 4 Patricias that had been killed a few hours earlier, attacking something called the White School. And it meant nothing to me at the time, except I knew that we were going into a war zone. And, so you take that moment and think to yourself, "Fuck, please, please
Yeah.
let me step forward for this. I'm a sergeant major. Like, don't let me falter. This is too important." I have, at the time, almost 160 soldiers in Charles Company. Like, don't let me falter. Give me the courage to find a way to kind of step up and lead these soldiers because you don't know. Nobody knows until that first moment when the guy beside you is bleeding out and you are under fire or you're wounded, how you're going to react. And, I had one soldier, Trud the Tour, who we had to pull back for a bit. But the soldiers of Charles Company, all of them stepped up. They never hesitated. It was amazing. And I remember my OC, Major Sprague, telling me, and he's laying in a hospital bed after the 8/10 strike. And I had already been in a hospital bed. And he said to me, he's getting ready to go back to Canada. And he said, "Sergeant Major, I wish you'd been there this morning." He said, "You wouldn't believe how brave these guys were when that 8/10 struck." He said, "We were getting ready to cross the river again after losing all those soldiers yesterday. We were going to cross the river again, and not one soldier was hesitant. They were all eager to get across that river and to get that piece of land that we didn't take the first day." And he said, then the A-10 struck. And he said, "I was amazed. You should have seen our soldiers perform when that A-10 struck." He said, 40 some odd people wounded, people dead, Mark Grave dead. And he said, our soldiers were magnificent. And that's what he was saying as he was bleeding from a shrapnel wound to his head, laying in a hospital gurney in Canada. He was telling me, because I missed it, how great our soldiers were, how great Charles Company was.
Taking action in utter chaos,
Utter
like managing the scene, leading.
All of them, privates, corporals, captains, everyone just stepped up, and they had no idea what was happening initially. Colonel Lavoy was there on the side of the mountain. Everybody initially thought, missile or mortar, something. The last thing that kind of comes to your mind in that split second listening to my soldiers tell the story is that it's an A-10 strike until you hear the sound. Then you know, okay, that was an A-10. And you look around and Warren Olstead, who was filling in for me because I was in hospital, he was the CQ, Keith Olstead. He said it was like a red mist was flying and blowing around the rocks at the base of Masumgar. He said, I looked out and he was bleeding from the head. He got shrapnel just above his eye. He said there was a red mist. I'm wondering, why is there a red mist? It was blood. There was so much wounded, and it was so powerful. The A-10, I mean, we all know the A-10 rounds are
Devastating.
tank busters. When they hit people, and on the side of the mountain where there's rocks and crap and everything, people were just blown apart, flesh flying.
Oh, yeah. A 5-second burst from an A-10 just brings utter annihilation onto the target.
And a split second from a second A-10 pulling the trigger. And our FUFAC just in a split second was able to yell for the second A-10 to pull up, or there would have been a second burst as well. So yeah, but the big point to me in that story is Major Sprague. He's such a great leader, laying in that bed and so excited to tell me about how great Canadian soldiers, Charles Company soldiers, performed in one of the worst moments. So yeah, they stepped up.
Just to bring it back to the idea of training and how much the training is meant to prepare us, hopefully, to be able to perform at our best abilities at the worst times.
Absolutely. And I remember a young captain, engineer captain, I was talking to him later, and he was saying, I became a medic. He said, once we realized it was a friendly fire, which I don't really like that term. I don't like friendly fire, no such thing, but,
A mass casualty
yeah. So
situation.
once I realized what had happened and that we weren't under any immediate threat, so I became a medic. There were so many casualties. I'm a captain. I have the engineers. And I was running around putting on bandages and stopping bleeding. And he said every soldier was running around doing the same thing. People who were trained in first aid and the triple C, TC, and whatever, they were all jumping in and saving lives. And medics were hurt, and some medics were helping. And so yeah, it was.
Sometimes it's upsetting that you wish there was more recognition, where you see some amazing acts of gallantry, of bravery, not for the cameras, not for any recognition. They're doing it because it was the right thing to do, and in their hearts, in their souls, that it was for them purpose that needed to be done. And honestly, why we even recognize people in the first place is because we know that human beings, when they act at these when human beings perform and do these tremendous acts of you could say positive deeds or positive acts of character, it's important to share that with the rest of our population.
Absolutely.
To let them know we can be like this.
Yeah,
And that
important.
in the worst of times, we can be like that, and that it's important to recognize these few people who have put themselves in a position where they're going to go and take the risk for Canada. They're going to cross the line of departure. They're going to meet what danger, what threat lies ahead, head on, ready to take it on and pay the price if required. And to give them some recognition in a form of a medal or a citation or something is something small, actually.
Absolutely.
And when you think about it, when you get a chance to reflect and you understand what it can cost, what it can cost us, it can cost our regimental community, the Army, Canada. And I think we should talk about these things to really spread the awareness. I feel like I can't control who gets a medal or anything, but I can control talking and saying the names of people, so that hopefully their names can live forever.
That is so important. I mean, that narrative needs to be told. The stories need to be told. And one of the things that I did after the book was I worked with a former RCR, Martin Springs, airborne RCR. He's had a storied career himself. He ran healthcare up in the Yukon. He was Doctors Without Borders. He's done a lot of stuff. And he did a documentary.
What's his name, sir?
Martin Spriggs.
Martin Spriggs?
Martin Spriggs. And his own story is amazing. But he decided a few years ago to go back to Toronto into school and take filmmaking. And he's done a couple of small films, one called Pofsky's Lost Patrol, that's on YouTube. A great little 15-minute video where they went off into the Sahara Desert looking for a British patrol that had been hit by the German Air Force, and all the vehicles and weapons and everything was just kind of left shattered into the desert. And they actually found parts of it. So he asked me if I would help him with a documentary on Medusa, and I did. And it was going to be a small project, and it ended up being much bigger. It's been on YouTube for about 6 months, I guess, and it's got about 30,000 views.
What's it called, sir?
Exact
same name. White School Black Memory.
Documentary on YouTube. And a lot of the interviews were done from Vancouver to Plant that Martin Spriggs drove in his pickup truck, little camper on the back, and he interviewed General Hillier, Colonel Boy, young soldiers, me, guys, what I call guys, and said, this is what we're doing. I need you to help me out here. And a lot of these guys don't want to go back into this time. I didn't. And guys like Colonel Lavoy, General Lavoy, and Sprague said, the only reason that I'm doing this is because you're asking. And I said, that's fine. If that's your reasoning, then I'm okay with that. And some of them came to my home in Winchester, and Martin was there. We did the interview. And it was going to be a small-time thing, but it ended up being so much better, so much bigger. And it has accolades from all over the world. And it's being looked at in 2 or 3 film festivals right now. It's being judged to, whatever filmmakers do to see how this is done. And the interviews are about the soldiers stories from the soldiers in their own words. And that was what I said to Spriggs when he first brought up the idea. The only way I will help is if the soldiers get to tell their stories in their words. I don't want this to be your story of Charles Company. And he said, absolutely. So it is absolutely amazing documentary. And most folks who have called me in the hundreds over the last 6 months have said it left them, in tears, crying. They couldn't believe, especially civilians. If Canadian soldiers did that, like Canadian soldiers were involved in that kind of stuff, they were shocked. People in Newfoundland, that I went home and I kind of put it out in a little film in the Legion for people to watch, and they were saying, wow, we didn't know that Canadian soldiers did that stuff. Canadian soldiers are doing that stuff every day.
Less than 1% of the population serves in the military. And so we have to understand that it's also our responsibility to try to share with them as well.
It's keeping stories alive.
Mm-hmm.
Letting Canadians know what great soldiers they have serving their country.
Yes.
Because if you leave it to the media and the internet and Facebook and all that crap, people will get the wrong impression. Because you can log on to Facebook any time of the day and find negative crap about the Canadian forces or soldiers or whatever. And it's not true. It's not the way it should be perceived. And the only way that Canada is going to get the true story is if soldiers are willing to step up and share their stories, share them with civilians, share them with people, share them with each other, and keep them alive. Because once we are gone, once my generation is gone, then who's going to tell those stories? They're gone.
Absolutely. And those stories are the legacy of the regiment.
It is.
The legacy of the regiment is the identity of who we are as Royal Canadians.
I couldn't agree more. And people pay homage to it, or people, some people will say, yeah, whatever, it's the regiment. I went to the RCR reunion a couple of years ago in London, and a young soldier from 3 RCR showed up, Corporal. I wish I knew his name. I have it written in a book. Serving soldier, Corporal. And there might have been 10 people from the Reg Force who showed up for the reunion. It was all associate members, veterans, retired. And most of those 10 people were senior folks who were probably obligated to go, right? Like some COs and but this young corporal. And he comes over to the table and he says, and I had a bunch of books there that were being, they were donated and people were auctioning them off for Homes for Heroes. And he came over and he started talking to me, and he reminds me of you in so many ways. And he said, I said, what are you doing here? I said, why are you here? He goes, I couldn't wait to come. As soon as I heard that there was going to be a reunion of RCR veterans, I wanted to be here. So I went to see my chain of command, and they were kind of,
Skeptical, like, what?
Really? But he said, I'm here because I want to hear the stories. And he said, I read your book and just sign this. And he went to every table introducing himself to these old, scraggly haired veterans, the young corporal, RCR. And there was the 7 or 8 of them standing outside. And he went and bought a bottle of Drambuie and went outside with glasses. He brought all these glasses out. And all these old veterans, I want to toast, would you mind toasting the regiment with me?
Do you remember any facial features of this guy? Because I have a name. I'm going to say this would have been Doused. Shout out to Doused because he's the one who told me about this book.
Was Doused.
He was at the
Short
Ortona.
guy?
Was he at the Ortona Toast? Do you remember?
Yes.
Yeah, it was him. It was Doused.
I was shocked.
Yeah.
That's why I remember him.
Yeah, what's his first name? Brian? Fuck. Doused.
Everybody at the reunion, we're talking about any table. RSM, senior generals, they're all saying, young corporals, they were so excited to have this young corporal who's showing an interest in the regiment.
Yeah.
So yes, if it's Doused, shout out, because you made an impression at that reunion that was second to none.
Shout out to Doused. Yeah, Doused, we all love you. You're a little weird, but we all love you. And we all know that deep down inside, you got your hearts in the right place. And good on you, man, for doing this stuff, because you know what? Like when it comes to like things like Paardeberg, when it comes to regimental reunions or whatever kind of big regimental events, yeah, it's cringe sometimes to convince all the guys, the masses, to want to go.
I was there.
Feels like forced fun, right? But guys, one day you might realize this, and hopefully you don't have to wait until you're old and retired to feel like what you did and what we all did is important. And to feel that like the camaraderie that we experienced, you don't have to only experience it when you come to work or when you're in the field or on operation, which we all love and think is important. The great thing about what we do, this career that we have, it's like it's our life. It becomes our life. It's our identity, especially those of us that really care. It's not a clock in, clock out. My job doesn't end when I leave the building. Like I'm always on. And some of the best guys I know, some of the best people I know in the military are so dedicated that their identity is part of what they do.
Absolutely.
And these
should be.
Yeah, and so good on people, good on the young soldiers out there who feel like it's important to them to want to come to these events. I don't think we should force people to go. It takes away the power and the magic of it.
I agree.
But I can't help but for all the young people listening here who are new members of the regiment, it's important to get involved, in these extracurricular events, these social events, the camaraderie, it's a big part of why we love what we do.
And the regiment is probably better at it than most.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, this kind of stuff doesn't happen elsewhere in the CL. Right? This kind of stuff doesn't happen in the Air Force. It doesn't even happen really in the Navy, a little bit better. And maybe not even across the Army, but in the regiment, this stuff has always been important.
Right.
Right? We always tried to put the effort in. And I think it is important that young soldiers get involved. No, I agree. No force fun. You don't force people to go to mess dinners and stuff. Young soldiers. I was in a battalion once where, 20 young corporals had to go to every mess dinner. So that nobody volunteered because why would they? Who wants to go to a mess dinner with a bunch of old senior NCOs and warrant officers? But there are folks who do want to do it, and they should be given that opportunity to become involved. It is so important.
I think so.
It's a great story.
We're a community at the end of the day.
We are, and we're a family.
Mm-hmm. Justin Douse, shout out.
Well done.
Hey, listen, sir. I think we are the kind of people who could probably talk all day. And I'm certainly a person who really enjoyed having this opportunity to be able to sit down with an author of my book and get right into it about who you are and a bit about it, and share with the world and share with our regimental community, the fantastic people that make up the Royal Canadian Regiment, past, current, and future members out there.
Absolutely. It's been my honor. And I've always remember the regiment. You know, people say, once royal, always a royal. And we sometimes don't necessarily live up to that. But I am a royal. You know, I joined in 1981. And once I retired, I became a retired royal. And I still like hearing about the regiment, and I stay involved, and I'm on the association board, and something I enjoy doing. It's so important. This book wouldn't be written if it wasn't for the regiment. Folks in the regiment stepped up, senior guys in the regimental association, who said, if you want this book published, we are going to help you. Because the regiment wanted this out there, not me. I couldn't have cared less at the moment. But the regiment wanted it, and they stepped up and they made sure that it got published and it went out. And so, yeah, I am always thankful for the regiment. And I thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak about the book, the documentary, and just chatting. I don't get to do it very much anymore. And like I said, I live in a little town, Winchester. Not a lot of royals around there, a few MPs, but not a lot of royals. So I don't get an opportunity to kind of reminisce with real soldiers.
Sir, it's been a privilege, to have you here. You, in my eyes, are as real as it gets to being a soldier, a warrior. So thank you. This has been a rich experience for myself and the team here
Thank you
today.
very much.
For everybody listening, the book White School Black Memories, by the author, Chief Warrant Officer, retired John Barnes, here with us today. It's a fantastic book. It's a Canadian book. It's a Royal Canadian book. It's our story. Go out there, get it, read it. This is something that it's important. It's important to share, capture, value on the service of our regiment and the great people in it. So, sir, thank you again. I would love to have you again on the podcast in the future. If you have any ideas, please reach out. You have our contact information. I can't wait to see you again, sir. Yes, for everybody listening here, thank you for tuning in again. I'm Sergeant Singh. This is a volunteer movement. We're always looking at trying to get people to participate in the project. I hope you had a great time, sir.
It has been awesome.
Everybody listening, I know skeptical at first, but come, give it a shot. We're here to do our best and trying to support the regiment and trying to build our community up. It's important, it's our identity. It's what we put so much of our time and energy into, and so do our families. So we owe it to them to try to capture our community service. All right, that's enough talking for me.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very
Pro
much.
Patria.
Pro Patria. That's a wrap. Thank you, guys.